Thanks for having us, for sure. It's an honor to be here, of course, and we're going to talk through our brand launch and design package for VICELAND, which is a new, well, not new anymore, but culture and lifestyle network put on by Vice Media. I'm Ryan Moore, creative director at Gretel.
And I'm Dylan Mulvaney. I'm art director at Gretel, and thanks to Lou for inviting us.
I like to think that's Dylan's real voice. Okay, so just some context. We'll give you the backstory, because you can see the work on our website and you can see it on the ADC site, but we want to give you the kind of full picture of the job. So, jumping right in, back in 2015, A&E, which is a TV conglomerate, basically ceded one of their networks to Vice, and they signed a deal. That guy in the picture there is Shane Smith, and if you know anything about Vice, he's kind of eponymous with Vice Media itself. He's one of the co-founders. Shane entrusted Spike Jonze and Eddie Moretti with the launch of this channel. And Spike, you probably know, he's a famous sort of feature film, music video, iconic director, creative genius, etc. And Eddie is the chief creative officer for Vice Media worldwide. And the guy on the right there is Matt Shane. He's head of design at Vice. And Matt gave us that photo, just to be clear. It's the photo he chose to put up there. And Matt was really responsible for navigating all the stakeholders on the client side and pushing through this brand and this sort of design system that, in the end, had a lot of twists and turns, and we'll get into that. So, we were summoned to Vice's headquarters in Brooklyn for a mysterious briefing. And right from the get-go, we kind of knew it would be an interesting job.
Yeah, they invited 4 different studios to pitch on it, and they briefed us all in the exact same room together at the same time.
Yeah, and later on, we mentioned that being weird, and I think Matt was like, oh, that's weird? Like, that's not how people do it? And we're like, no, that's not how we've ever done it before. So you're sitting around the room with your competition, like wondering, should I ask a question, or if by asking a question, am I giving something away? Like, I don't want to, I'm really checking myself in the meeting. So that was an indication that it was going to be a different kind of job. And I think the brief itself, which we're just top-lining here, was also super unique. They didn't talk about who they were, or there's no slide called brand pillars or ethos or personality. It was really all about the business, what they're doing, sketches of shows they're producing, and where they're headed. So for us, that really freed us up. We didn't have to worry about defining who they are. The Vice sensibility is super clear. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the brand, the magazine, the digital verticals. So we could just focus on how to translate how they behave in the world into a brand. So that's where we started, and Dylan's going to take you through the pitch, which you'll notice looks nothing like the final result, if you know the final result. But again, it's an express view of the whole process here.
All right, so here we go. Our pitch took us about an hour. We printed a pitch book that had about 100, maybe 120 pages in it. We had 60 or so slides. I'm going to give you the very condensed version. For Vice, their content is the brand, and our job, as we saw it, was to step back, and in doing so, push their content forward. We started by looking at behavioral analogs, and we kind of start every job this way. We decided that Vice was a lens, that they're always framing the story from a unique point of view. Vice is global. Vice never stops because culture never stops. Vice has a strong point of view, and they publish it in print and online. They're a feed. They deal with sports, music, news, politics, sex, food, travel. And they also act as a guide. They navigate you through the world through their kind of specific Vice perspective. So these analogs gave us a kind of list of objectives, but we had to figure out how to boil all of this down into the brand.
Yeah, and you're looking at the pitch deck here. So at this point in the job, however, I think we had 4 weeks or something from the meeting to the time we presented. We lost a week right away deciding whether or not to take it on. We were really busy at the time. We were turning down other jobs. I was about to have a baby, actually, so that complicated things. And we spent another week just coming up with basically creative strategy, like what's the idea around the idea. And I'm sure you've been in this position before, people in this room, where you have what you think is a great idea, but you just can't get it out. You can't put it down and make the design system express the thing that you know it can be. So we were pretty frustrated. We had like 2 weeks to go, and we left one night, and Dylan stayed till the wee hours and had a few frames the next morning that really kind of cracked it open. And you've been looking at it the whole time. We called the system that we designed for them the line.
Yeah, and it's kind of a visual metaphor for a brand like Vice that never stops seeking. So we can use it as a feed. It acts as a timeline. It can contain content. It can also frame it, and it never stops. It's this kind of functional tool. It's transparent. It lets the content move forward, which is one of our big goals. And it's also modular. It can be used to hold headlines, subheads, datelines, body copy, imagery, footage. And we brought it to life by reflecting those behaviors that we talked about earlier. So it can seek, it can scrub, zoom in and out, scale. The whole system's really responsive.
I think for us, especially designing, this is a linear television brand that obviously has a digital component, but defining how the brand moves and behaves for really all of our jobs is pretty critical. But in this case, it's not just animating the frames and the design that we made, but it's imbuing the spirit of the brand with those behaviors, the same behaviors from the beginning that are kind of core. So this is the montage we showed at the end of that hour.
That's like a next level Sherry Garcia.
By chance, I seen her in the lobby of the Ritz with a man, the one that swings the hockey stick. I was wearing all white and my hair was looking precious. Shit, I might cop a chest and a dresser. I heard your bitch. Bones like smokestacks, young black terror attack. Hair on their neck raised, scaring them back. Keeping my Kerouac first rate, they in the first grade. Begging like babe.
The new legitimate business of marijuana is at a crossroads.
Are you a little afraid to maybe smoke the whole thing?
It's a little intimidating.
I'm very conscious right now of the animals. Like, very in tune with the animals.
Yeah, so that was our pitch, and Dylan blazed through the book. I'm sure, it was like 2 seconds on each slide. But we thought it was great. We thought there was great reception in the room. Sometimes you pitch and you just have no idea how it was received, but we actually got, literally pats on the back from the client, high fives, handshakes, that kind of thing. It felt good. So we didn't want to jinx ourselves by saying maybe we got the job, but we headed back to the studio with high hopes. And then nothing happened. So we're back to work on other jobs. A week goes by, radio silence, nothing at all. 2 weeks, still nothing. And the guy we pitched to, the sort of creative lead at the time, was leaving the company. So we're thinking this is not good for us. And 3 weeks, which is the whole time that we spent developing the pitch has now gone past on the back end, and we still have nothing and no word from them. Finally, the phone rings, and it's Matt giving us what seemed like really bad news. He had, in those 3 weeks, been sort of running it up the chain and had shown the work to Spike and Eddie, and they thought that this just wasn't right for the brand, which was pretty awful to hear, but followed immediately by the fact that Shane had a new project. And he was looking for a brand that felt like a living interface, kind of a quantitative, responsive framework that could deliver information for the news franchise on HBO. And Vice was launching their daily news show as well in a series of specials. So it turns out we got that job out of this pitch, and this is how it ended up looking. This is Vice on HBO. So we got that job, and on top of it, Matt was really advocating for us and sort of went to bat and convinced Spike and Eddie to give us another chance based on the pitch, knowing that if we could sort of ground ourselves in the right context, that we could make something together that would be great. So we took another crack at VICELAND, but it was a total redo. And we had this mysterious meeting with no, invitation list or anything at Vice in this room with nobody in there. And in come Spike and Eddie and start talking about the job, talking about our work. And we got 2 big notes out of it. And one was to really pull back even further. So we pitched what we thought was a pretty stripped back, undesigned brand. But they said, it's got to be even less slick. And I think less sort of corporate is how Spike phrased it so that the people and the personalities on the network could kind of shine through even more. And unpolish the thing, so make it feel less like it came out of a perfectly sort of rendered choreographed sequence and more like people are behind this thing. So those are great notes. For us, we always like to get top tier kind of gut reactions and not really prescriptive, specific design notes. But again, total redo. So we go back to the studio and start pretty much all over.
Yeah, we had to really recalibrate. So we started pulling reference and sketching using these new directives from Spike and Eddie. Everybody had a kind of different idea of where to start and how to interpret those two notes. But as we dug back in, started pinning up, sorting, and revising, 3 directions kind of came to the fore. And in our next review, these are what we showed them. We didn't have any pitch book, no deck. We just taped these things up on the wall. Our first direction was based around a functional idea that's especially relevant for television. It was built around subtitling. So we found a typeface GT Cinetype that's based on subtitling type. And we used that so that the messaging could stay kind of transparent and it felt a little bit raw, a little bit underworked, but in a good way.
Yeah, and I think there was some love for this direction, but it didn't have all the legs and all the latitude that we thought it needed, that they thought it needed, especially for the tonal range of Vice, and it didn't also reduce that well for mobile.
Our second approach was built on the idea that Vice was out on the street. We borrowed from the language of amateur design and the kind of DIY man with a van street flyers that you would see taped all around the light poles in the city. I think we pride ourselves on building systems, especially brand systems. And I know we could put some rules around this thing, but it's a pretty fine line.
Yeah, it could really tip in the wrong way. I think anybody looking at this could see how it could lose the irony and just become straight up bad.
Some wacky moves.
Oh, right, and in particular, so one frame really jumped out to Spike, and we had put a phone number in there from the spirit of, man with a van, call now kind of thing. And he seized on that right away. And keep this in mind because it comes back later in the presentation, but it really, I think, opened up a new line of thought for us around the brand as a whole.
And our third direction might look familiar. This one was super stripped back, and we titled it Generic, very original. It was a combination of a kind of on-brand with Vice's general punk attitude. And this is the direction that we started building everything around. We started filtering all our reference and looking for ways to build on the idea and try and tie it back to Vice. And it ended up coming down to this. Vice is equally comfortable operating in high culture, low culture, and everywhere in between. Which led pretty directly to our final design language. It's kind of designed, it's kind of default, not really perfectly either. And these became our directives for the rest of the brand, which ended up informing our logo exploration and where we ended up with that. Our color, if you can call it that. Our type, which was Helvetica, you may have heard of it. Layout, even the way that things moved. We kept saying to each other that this should be able to be animated by somebody who can't animate it, like me.
Yeah. Dylan's a very talented art director and designer, but does not animate. And the point wasn't, I don't think, to do it in a deliberately, throwback or lo-fi method. It was about making it feel like someone was behind this. Someone intentionally made this almost like ASCII art on purpose, and it didn't come out of, a slickly rendered package, After Effects or something. You could do this in basically Google Slides if you had to.
And the other thing is it let us do what we're always trying to do for any brand, which is build a system that can live and adapt across all the different touch points, something that creates a consistent impression, something that doesn't become repetitive or formulaic. And we ended up putting it right back out into the street.
And back to the phone number and the people behind the brand. I think to our clients' credit, they didn't leave a lot on the cutting room floor. We presented a lot of pretty out there ideas for most network brands, and they seized on a lot of them, especially this one. So in the meeting, when we showed this for the first time, Spike was even saying, yeah, we could have a phone in the office and they could ring and we could record people calling in and put them back on the air. And we're like, that sounds amazing. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. But it opened up this dialogue with the audience, and every time they launch in a new country, they take out a phone number local to that country and record user voicemail. So you have this dialogue back and forth, and you get really productive feedback.
I'd like to speak to a person, a manager of the VICELAND channel. Hello, is somebody there? I'd like to leave a message on how ugly your new VICELAND channel is. It's about such stupid people barbecuing in Canada. It's about criminal men on the show. It's the most ugly show I ever turned on in my life. I am never going to watch this channel, and so are none of my friends. That's the ugliest channel, VICELAND, that I've ever seen in my life. There's no substance to that show. It's ugly, you jackasses. I hope that channel falls apart next week. Nobody likes it. You jackasses.
Yeah. And, you know, the brand can still play high and point viewers outside to things happening in culture, and it can go low and advertise everything from interns wanted to local goods and services. And even the brand's guidelines took the form of zines that they could print in the office and update as needed. The whole spirit of it was kind of captured all the way down the chain. And in the end, it kind of comes together and feels like this.
When you see your kid laying on the ground and you don't know if you're going to watch them take their last breath, that's a hell of a feeling. And I've been through it 7 times. It's real out here. I know.
Thomas, are you going to send tomorrow?
Probably not, to be honest.
Are you going to send next week?
Very good chance.
Did you send last week?
A lot.
There are waves of feelings, I think, across my skull.
We have so much fun.
This is the life right here. I'm totally uncomfortable there. That's super uncomfortable right there. All right, let's go.